Welcome back to the Radian Podcast, your go-to source for digital product-focused discussions on design, technology, and digital health advancements. I'm Maxwell Murray, your host, and I hope today's episode inspires your next big idea. Joining us today is Dr. Joshua Reynolds. He's the founder and CEO of Atlas Biotech. The company uses functional genomics to reduce risk in cancer drug discovery. They match therapies to patients using unique genetic profiles. Atlas Biotech builds tools that help teams anticipate resistance. Their technology predicts clinical outcomes. It also supports smarter decisions in drug development. Josh's background is in biomedical engineering and transitional research. He took Atlas Biotech from an academic spin-out to a valuable partner in the biotech space. Welcome, Josh.
Thanks for having me, Max. I'm happy to be here.
This is an episode I've been excited to record. It's been really nice to get to know you over the past few weeks here. We got a good amount of questions here. We kind of want to start with the origin here, the founding of Atlas Biotech. What originally pulled you towards working on cancer drug resistance and precision oncology?
I actually did my undergraduate work in neuroscience and spinal cord injury work. And while I was at my undergraduate studies at Texas A&M, my grandfather got diagnosed with lymphoma and pretty quickly passed away. And so I think that was the inception of my motivation for trying to work in cancer and help patients avoid a similar fate, right? Give them a happy, healthy life if we can. So that's probably the source of my motivation. Came up here to Penn State and found some really good professors to work with. I got involved with some good projects, and that's how I got to where I am today.
I hadn't realized the personal connection there, and I've noticed that more and more as I get to interact with really brilliant and passionate and motivated people like you. There's like this family layer. There's this deeper pursuit. It's not just academic.
It's unfortunately common, right? Like I think everyone's been touched by cancer in some way. It's exciting to see so many people working on it, but there's still a lot of work left to do, right? So I think there's always opportunities to help contribute to what will one day hopefully be a cure. So that's what we're working towards, is trying to improve how we develop and administer these medicines to patients.
So let me ask you this. When did Atlas shift from an academic idea into something you knew had to become a company?
Yeah. So again, a little bit of a personal aspect to it. I was finishing up my PhD here and was looking for what I wanted to do next. I initially planned to move to Boston and work at a company or start a startup there or something. And then I met my now wife, and she still had a few years left in her degree. So I said, well, I'm not moving anymore. I'm staying here. So I had to figure out what I wanted to do locally. And we're in State College, Pennsylvania. Not a lot of biotech around here, unfortunately. So I was working on a pretty cool project in my academic lab. We'd already talked about the possibility of having it be a commercial product or service. We saw that there was a gap in the market in functional genomics, and specifically looking at these large-scale libraries of mutations in a drug target. People have not done it commercially and haven't really done it well, even in like academic research. So we saw a gap, a potential value we could provide. And I wrote a grant on it, a small business transition grant that I sent off to the National Cancer Institute while I was also trying to work on my dissertation and finish my degree. Not really thinking, I was like, we'll see what happens there. I'm gonna shoot my shot and we'll see where it lands. And as I was preparing to defend, I got the notice of award. I had gone through kind of the just-in-time documentation and everything. So I got this notice of award the same month I was defending my degree. And so I had about a week between my PhD being done and having to start the company because the grant was kicking off. And I was then out of the university, had to find the space to rent and build a lab. And so it was a bit of a whirlwind. But that was the real, ignition to the company. Was the NCI looked at it and thought there was something valuable there, gave us some support to get going, and we've been building ever since.
Awesome. I mean, talk about a quick turnaround and juggling a lot.
Yeah, it was a very, if I look back, this was May 2024, and I look back on it, and I don't think I slept that entire month. I was just like nonstop working, trying to get things done. I was also doing like some national like training programs basically that the NSF provides, and one that Penn State works on. So I was doing a lot of like startup related things too. So I was not a human for a solid month there.
Man, that's crazy. On autopilot a bit, I bet.
I don't know how I made it through. I will say, give my wife a little credit. I think she like just like brought me food and put it next to me as I was working. It was like, please eat something. So
Okay, so besides the whirlwind of it all, what surprised you the most about the transition from academia to running a company?
the speed at which things need to get done, I think, was the biggest transition. And I think I've always been pretty good about making lists of tasks and then like checking them off. I've always enjoyed that aspect of work. But in academic labs, typically you think on things, you talk things over, you try a few things out. It's a little more relaxed environment, I think. And then once I was at the company, and I think this is not just startups, but in general in industry, especially in biopharma, there is a drive to get things done fast and efficiently. And especially when you have a clock, right? We have a certain amount of funding for a certain amount of time. And I don't know what's going to happen after that, right? So I was like, well, if I don't start building now, we could run out of time. So I've always been a little motivated to just be quick, do a good job, and be efficient with our funds. So that was the biggest difference that I instantly noticed, right? I was like, I have to get things done now. I can't wait.
Yeah, yeah. There's pressure to execute in a different way, I'm sure, and it seems like you did experience that.
We've had a few folks come over from academia to join the company, and that's one of the things that they've said is the pace at which we operate is much faster, which is good. I think we're trying to be careful, do a good job, but also we need to get things done and execute.
There's a stat that kind of blew me away in previous conversations with you. 90% of drug candidates fail after entering clinical studies. 50% of these failures are due to preventable efficacy gaps. There's a problem here. So from your perspective, why do so many oncology drugs fail in clinical trials?
Well, it's really challenging to treat cancer in general, right? These are your human cells, your patient's cells that have had some often very small mutation that has caused them to become cancerous and oncogenic. So finding a drug that is both effective against that cancer and safe for the patient's healthy tissue is hard. That's why it's been such a challenging disease to treat. What's staggering to me is that despite all these advances in technology, we have stagnated in terms of our success rates for these clinical trials. In oncology, it's actually lower. It's about 5% success in oncology, so it's even worse than the average. So again, it's a challenging field. And I think the biggest gap is in translational models. I think people do a lot of really good work on the discovery side, on the biology, trying to understand the mechanisms of these drugs. But I think once you're trying to take what is a drug candidate that you maybe put into patients, we haven't developed a lot of new assays in the past couple of decades that are more predictive of patient outcomes. And I think that's the big gap right now is these translational models. There's a lot of evidence suggesting that the classic in vivo studies are not very predictive of if a patient will have adverse events or if it will actually treat the disease we're trying to in a human. So I think that's where there's the biggest opportunity to improve our systems and be more predictive of, will a patient actually benefit from this medicine?
We were talking about a pretty big gap there, and I'm sure there's a lot of confusing information out there. One question we have for you is, what are some misconceptions people have about predicting drug response and resistance?
I think that the classic way people have done it is retrospective. And I think that's never going to be successful when you're battling cancer specifically, because cancer is always evolving. It's always trying to find escape paths for whatever treatment you're using. So if you wait until you're giving a patient medicine to look for failure points, you've already lost, right? Like that, the cancer is going to figure out how to evade that medicine. And it's going to probably happen faster than you can design new drugs to combat it. So and this is the whole idea of the lab I was in at Penn State, Dr. Justin Pritchard's lab, is to try and predict and forecast where these failure points in therapies will happen so that we can engineer the minimum pathways of resistance and maximize the durability of these medicines. So in our case, we're trying to look at in a patient population where there's lots of mutations in this drug target. We have a good drug, we know it works, but we want to figure out what mutation will cause that drug to fail. We want to model all of the potential pathways, the potential mutations that might cause that drug to fail a patient, and then predict which ones will actually be successful to treat, which ones will not be. That way we know that we're giving patients medicines that actually work. And also defining what is the treatable patient population for a new drug if we're wanting to investigate that before putting it into a trial.
Yeah. So it sounds like the biggest gap there is having to be retroactive rather than proactive.
Exactly. I think that historically companies have been retroactive, probably a little bit trying to kind of maybe prop up their drugs a bit, right? They don't want to look for failure before they have to. So if they can get their drug approved and into the clinic, they're going to make some money. They're pretty happy. But what we're saying now is as more medicines are being developed, you need to have differentiation from what's existing and being able to say which patients you can actually treat and forecast that, I think is going to be very powerful as opposed to the classic retrospective analyses people do on what patients they can treat.
Yeah, and that ties into some phrasing that I see you guys using your communications and website material. You map the genetic landscape before your clinical trial, right? Proactive, not reactive.
Yep, we want to get as much information as we can on a drug or a drug series before making that decision to put. It's a lot of risk to take a drug and put it in a clinical trial. So before making that very important pivotal decision, you want to have as much information as you can. So that's what we're trying to do, is improve our decision making and the quality of data that we have prior to escalating a drug into phase 1.
In plain language, how do you describe what Atlas Biotech does? I feel like it's a loaded question. In plain language, how do you do this amazing thing? Go ahead.
It's been a challenge for me coming from academia. I that was one of the biggest critiques I would get starting out was like, okay, well you said a bunch of words, no one knows what they mean. So it's something I've worked on for the past couple of years. But in plain language, we make a cellular model. So we take human cells or some other model cell line, grow it in culture, and we introduce a bunch of mutations into that cell line to represent what might happen in a patient. And we're trying to cover as much of the genetic diversity that a patient could have as possible. We use next generation sequencing to keep track of how these mutations interact and respond to drugs. And we can do this very quantitatively with the technologies that we've developed. After we run these assays, we can go and look and say, how does each mutation that we engineered into these cells cause a drug to work or not work, or maybe work a little bit, worse. And we can be very quantitative and say, given a certain dose of drug in a patient, is it likely to actually help a patient with mutation X, or is it going to be ineffective? And should we look for a different drug?
Yeah, that's that mapping aspect that we were referencing earlier, right?
Yep, we call the libraries of cells. We say that it's a library of mutations, and we're looking at the landscape of mutations and a certain drug target, a protein. And so we're mapping the resistance of that protein.
Excellent. How does functional genomics help predict how drugs will perform in the clinic?
Functional genomics is a pretty broad term, and that is what we specialize in, is functional genomic tools. And this library of mutations and looking for drug resistance and predicting patient outcomes is one application of functional genomics. But really what that means is we're making intentional changes to a genome, to a cell, right, to its genetic code that we think might represent some aspect of the patient population or a mutation or disease. And we're doing a functional assay. So we're trying to say, how does that mutation change how these cells behave? And that could be a lot of different things, right? We could say, does the cell grow faster or slower? We're saying, does it respond to this drug differently? So it's a pretty broad term, but we're using that as a tool to model the genetics and the diversity of humanity and patients.
So this is all fascinating science and technology here. And, from my standpoint, it's always fun to then think about like the value proposition of that. What does it mean in the marketplace? What makes Atlas Biotech's approach different from existing CROs or research providers? And I would even maybe layer in another level here too. Like, are you even a CRO? How would you define yourself?
I think I've gotten a lot of different input on what we are actually from advisors and people that we've worked with. I think CRO is like is a fair term, but again, it's a broad umbrella term that can be applied to people helping run clinical trials or people doing sponsored research or contract research at the preclinical level. The way that we want to interact with our clients is as a collaborator and as a resource for them. And not just like a vendor, a service provider where you say, hey, I want this cell line, do this mutation, and then, you don't hear back for a month and you get something in the mail, right? We want to actually work with people to solve interesting questions and design new tools to do that. That's what we have fun with. We like engineering and design and all that. So yeah, that's what we try to present ourselves as and operate as. It's almost like a sidekick biomedical engineering firm. I don't know, specializing in functional genomics. But we do develop some of these tools that we want to have as like platforms, right? So we want to be able to have kind of modules that we can use to solve very common problems. And to answer the first part of your question, like what differentiates us from some of these larger vendors? Some of them are adopting functional genomics. They're not very quick to do so. Having kind of seen the steps they've taken, they're using NGS, right? They're trying to build some internal pipelines, but it's not to the point where I would say they're near as good as us when it comes to building really high quality libraries, thinking really quantitatively about the data and making these translational predictions. These are aspects that no one has done as well as we have. And I need to toot our own horn a little bit here. That is what we've focused on is we can get data, but does that data matter, right? Can we actually use it to make decisions that are correct when it comes to treatable patients? So that's what we're trying to focus on is not just, we're getting you a spreadsheet with some data. We're trying to say this actually can help you make a good decision on what to do with your assets.
Anyone in business should always contemplate, am I just providing a solution or am I providing impact? And that's what I think I just heard you say. Like as a partner in the biotech space, I can pump out data. I can, share a bunch of information, but if it's not kind of put through that lens and filter of, but how does it impact de-risking the program? Coming to you for what you deliver versus the rest of the marketplace, do you anticipate that being kind of the standard turnaround time, or, will your operations facilitate quicker updates and richer updates that will help scientists and program leads figure out like, okay, this is how we make certain our target advances all the way to the finish line?
One of the things that we try to focus on too is having more touch points, interacting frequently with people, working with them, like I said before, to solve problems. So I think, yes, I think we're going to be able to be more nimble and work with teams to build a solution that will solve their problem, not something that's just one size fits all, right? And I think that's one of the challenges working with the larger CROs and providers of these preclinical services. I don't want to say that we can turn things around lickety split. We want to do a good job, right? So I think the quality of the data, it means we might take longer to get there, especially if we're working with someone to put a custom solution. But that data, I think, will help make a more robust and strong decision for a pipeline or a program than you might get with a little bit maybe faster turnaround time. But I think that's going to have impact to your program poorly in the long term. So maybe a little inverse logic there. We might not be as fast to get you data as some of these big CROs, but I think we can get you the right data faster, and that's what matters.
Yeah. Another thing that we've discussed in the past as well, though, is as you work, the more clients you guys get, there's actually like a compounding improvement in your value to the marketplace, which I find so exciting. It's like when you address one project, let's call it that data helps your library improve. And there's like even future ideas where it's like, not only are you serving as like this partner in biotech, but like there's also like potential for clinical impact when you think about matching drugs to patients.
Yeah. So whenever we work on a project, we typically have to build a library of these mutations like we talked about before. And every time we build a library, that's another asset that we add to our bank, right? So we can go and use that library for other studies. And we typically always try to look at existing drugs as controls at the very least. And so one of the things that motivates me is looking at how we can use this information to actually improve like treatment decisions happening today. So one kind of like branch of what we're doing is making a database, a website that people can go, clinicians and patients can go look at and say, if my patient has a rare mutation that there's not clinical guidance on, because that happens a lot, especially for these diseases where targeted therapies are used, they need some help knowing which drug's going to be effective. And so we're trying to make an available public resource for these people to go reference. And, we can't say, we're not clinicians, we can't say use this drug, but we can say, hey, here's evidence that we have that strongly suggests on like a biologic molecular level, this drug is going to be more effective for your patient if they have this mutation. Maybe shy away from this drug. I think that's going to be very helpful for patients that have these rare mutations. And that's something that isn't currently available. It's a solvable problem that we see. And that's pretty motivating for me. I don't know if we're going to make a lot of money off of it, right? It's not a commercial product really, but I think it's something that will help improve treatment decisions and hopefully help patients have more successful outcomes in the long term. So that's something we want to add to over time as well. Then try to give back a bit, I think.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly admirable. And, I constantly think about the age we live in, this age of artificial intelligence, which will only become more and more useful to us as high quality and impactful data is made available that's accurate for those models and all these tools to leverage. So you heard it here, people. Like, watch and continue to monitor Atlas Biotech as they build these libraries. This company, I think, is positioned to impact not only drug discovery, but also have a patient level impact, which is really, really incredible. You sit kind of in two very interesting and impactful worlds, Josh.
No, thanks, Max. And I think helping patients is the motivation for us. I'd love to have a successful commercial business. I think what we're doing is valuable and will help biopharma companies. And also, as you said, I think a lot of these AI models need robust data sets that are built for purpose. That's another area that we're trying to facilitate and help out in. But at the end of the day, what's the objective? The objective is to get better medicines to patients and get them the right medicine, right? So that the personalized medicine aspect of all this is the real goal. So, us building preclinical models that are more accurate in translation to these patients, that's hand in hand with having personalized medicine that actually has successful outcomes for patients. They can give a better quality of life. They can live longer. That's the real goal. So whatever we can do, every time we design a new assay, that's what we have in mind is this actually going to model a patient well, get them a better drug, help them have more success with their treatment?
Yeah, I want to kind of circle back to de-risking a bit too. As I understand it, when looking at this type of data, the marketplace has been highly qualitative, and you're able to kind of shift that to a quantitative aspect. What examples can you provide when someone engages with Atlas Biotech and qDMS that leads to different decision making as a result of having access to the type of data you facilitate?
This specific tool that we've been talking about, these libraries, it's part of a field called deep mutational scanning. This is a technology where you look very closely at all these mutations in your library in a specific protein. That's what the field refers to this as, DMS. And DMS in a lot of functional screens are qualitative by nature because you actually don't know exactly what you're measuring. It's a very relative measurement. Often there's a lot of uncertainty in what you're looking at. And that's due to a lot of different aspects, like technical aspects, right? So that's where we have worked on and tried to engineer over the last few years is how do we make this really powerful tool that is qualitative kind of by nature? How do we take that and make it quantitative to where we can say, this isn't a relative evaluation. This is a measurement that we can take and translate. That's kind of the key word here. We want to translate that data into patient doses, right? Like we want to say, given how much of this drug is available in a patient, what's its half-life, how long is it there? we can try and tie those together. And that's where we get our translational value. We can be very accurate with our predictions because we have quantitative measurements with units and everything, right? Like that's the goal. So, and this is the technology that we developed, right? So we can say with a high degree of accuracy what the actual measurements of each of the cells are in our big pool, our DMS pool that we're running. We can measure every cell and its growth rate at different concentrations of drug. And that lets us build a dose response curve for every single mutation in our library. And that's like the core kind of like engine of what we're doing. And we can use that to evaluate lots of different things.
Yeah, I can't resist an analogy. You've probably learned that in our conversations in recent history. But like it makes me think of like turning on your GPS, right? And imagine if it was like, I can get you approximately to Target or Starbucks. And we'll see, maybe you'll get there versus what I think you guys are doing is like every roadblock, every delay, every place you need to reroute, like there's like a high fidelity picture data set that like specifically points out where you're going to see resistance, how you're going to increase the durability of the dose. And it could just never stops fascinating me because I realized that cancer is like kind of like a shapeshifter when it comes to treating patients. And so for us to finally be having discussions of, okay, well, it can try to escape. It can try to move out of the way. It can try to avoid dosage. It can try to nullify what we're doing. We say, no, predictive recalculating to get to the destination of healing that patient. That I think is just really, really interesting.
Yeah, I like the analogy there, right? Like we're trying to look along the route and look at all the different pathways that the disease might take. And in this case, we're trying to make sure that there is no pathway, right? That would be the ideal outcome, is that there's no pathway for this cancer, this cell to evade treatment. One kind of fun aspect of what we're doing, I'll say, is the cells that we're studying, right? These are modeling patients. Some of them are derived from humans. The fact that we can take a 2D culture, so this is like a little technical mumbo jumbo perhaps, but there's a lot of cool work being done in 3D models, spheroids. We can take a 2D culture of cells in a dish, right? And just with some like really careful engineering and thinking about drug availability, drug binding, pharmacokinetics, we can take a very simple model and make really accurate predictions of patient outcomes. That's just the start, right? Like that's what gets me excited. It's like this is step one to having a really good picture of personalized medicine, of pharmacogenetics, and the way that we can take this tool and apply it to other systems, other models. I'm excited to see what we can build in the future too. We're going to take this beyond just looking at targeted therapies for very specific types of cancer. We want to have tools that work for all cancer types, right? For any drug modality. So that's to me the potential of what we can do. And it's not going to be just us, right? A lot of people are working on cool ideas here, but I think we're in an age of really rapid advancement. And I'm hoping that we can see this translational gap, that 5% success rate. I'm hoping we see that start going up. And we want to help contribute to that, right? So yeah, the potential, right, of all these technologies is exciting.
Excellent. That actually checked off something I was going to ask. I wanted to know what excited you about this space and where it's headed. But now I'm going to ask you another question as you just inspired. So it sounds like, there should be a platform that needs to be developed for companies like yours to collaborate. So let me know if you agree with that, or if I'm behind the curve and like there's something already out there forming. And then here's your moment to kind of point out maybe some peers out there like, look, guys, we think we're developing a protocol, a system here that you could hook into, and we could do some really great stuff together.
Yeah, there are some websites that people can use to find research services like scientist.com and some of these other ones. So those exist. I think they're relatively well used. I think people look at them, but most of our success and interactions have come through word of mouth or just meeting people. This is a bit of an aside, but given the amount of outbound messaging from companies these days, right? Whether that's like AI generated stuff or whatever. There's a lot of noise in the digital world when it comes to marketing. So the kind of face to face, organic, personal interactions, that's where I see a lot of value in trying to engage with people. And yeah, that's something that I want to keep core to what we do is
Nice.
working with people to solve their problems, right? It's something that we are going to stick to as one of our core like fundamentals. Yeah, if people have interesting problems, they're working on a cool drug, they want to try and get some more information on, we're looking for collaborations. We're happy to help out. You can reach out to me, atlasbio.tech. That's our website, little plug.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I would reach out to us. But we're excited to work on cool project with folks.
So there's, I'm sure, a lot of data, a lot of information that comes out of the analysis that you do and the assay development that you do. How do you communicate complex scientific results to teams that need to make strategic decisions?
Yeah, I think that's one of the more challenging aspects of what we're doing, especially if it is virtual, right? If we're trying to interact with people through like a slide deck or something. So one of the things that we've been developing is an interactive website-based viewer for our data. I think that's something that's relatively novel. Some of the larger institutes have things like this. If you look at some of the stuff at the Broad Institute, they'll have online resources to go look at all of their screens and stuff that are available. And that was kind of the inspiration for this. But we want to have that as a data delivery platform too. So instead of just sending someone a file with a bunch of, Excel sheets or something, we want to give you actually interactive, useful information where you don't say, all right, I'm going to go do my own analyses on this. We can say, hey, here is what matters out of this last data set that we got for you. Here's how that's going to impact from our perspective, what will be successful in your patient population you want to treat. We want to take that to actually like outcomes, right? Like, can we tie this data set to patient outcomes? How does it impact your treatable patient population when you're like, post, clinical trials and you're actually treating people in the market? So we want to do more than just get you data. We want to get you answers, and that's what we're working on with this kind of visual, interactive data delivery platform.
Excellent. Okay. And so when working on this company and building it out, what has been uniquely challenging about commercializing a service built on deep science?
Well, despite me having to learn how to talk less jargony, I think that was kind of the first hurdle for me. In the biopharma space, you're typically working with people that are very well versed with the jargon of the current day. So that isn't too much of an issue. But when it comes to marketing, like I mentioned before, I think there's a lot of noise in the marketing space. And so really finding those organic, meaningful connections, I think has been, I don't want to say it's been the biggest challenge because we've had some success there, but it's definitely one that I'm always having to work on, right? It takes effort. I'm not just trying to like get them to give me money. We're trying to help people solve problems. So we want to make sure there's a good fit both ways when we go to talk to people. So that's been, I will say, like high effort on our part to do that. Yeah, besides that, I mean, I'm coming from an academic background. I didn't even know what marketing meant. I think when I started the company, I was like, oh yeah, Google Ads or something. So there's a whole aspect there of presenting the company professionally, right? Making sure that we can go and disseminate what we're doing concisely and effectively, right? What is what we do in 30 seconds? That's something I've had to work on. So the whole aspect of business as opposed to science has been, I think, a learning step for me. That was probably the biggest challenge was thinking about it in a different way, right? Like we can do
Yeah.
cool science, but what does that mean for the people that are making like financial decisions for these companies? That's what I have to be able to understand and help improve, right?
Yeah. One of the things that really impressed me when we first met, though, was the fact that, you had begun this journey not long ago, but you're already, as a newer biotech partner, had people that were low key, clients. Like it was like you got to work and people started to engage you for your services. And that happened organically. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So we started out, like I said, in 2024. I got booted out of the university, started up the company. And within about 6 months, we had some work that we were finishing, the planning for with a couple companies. And I think that just shows that there's a need for help, right? And if you and a lot of it's trust. Like these were people that we had been introduced to or met through either just like video calls or through a mutual contact. And so I would chat with them, learn about their problem, see what say, hey, here's what we can do to help. And I think just the ability to execute, same day,
Yeah.
that was what sealed the deal for them. They were like, oh, you can get this started like today. I was like, yeah, sure. I'll go like the cells now and get to work. And they were like, great. So yeah, so I think that aspect of it made it really easy. And like I said, we're small and we're nimble. There's not a lot of paperwork to go through, right? That's a big issue with some of these big CROs. So when it comes to like the current funding environment, right now it's not great for biotechs. A lot of these like earlier companies, these like Series A companies, seed funded companies, they need answers, but they need them quick and they need them kind of cheap, right? They don't need a full blown in vivo study. They need a couple data sets that will help them convince investors for the next round. And so that's where I think there's a bit of a gap, especially in the US marketplace. I think there's overseas solutions, but in terms of, boots on the ground here in the US, there's not a lot of options for small, nimble biotech. So
Perfectly timed and at the right level, again, being nimble, being that partner. You're absolutely right. We talk to biotech firms and we observe the market and we see that there's like a reservation to invest. Of course, there were stronger investments a number of years ago. And like during the pandemic, there was like a big uptick in like, oh man, like biotech's hot. That's cooled off. Working with companies like yours, the discussion is about how do we position you to better serve those that are standing up against those kind of challenges of where we're going to get funding, look at our burn rate, how are we going to get our ideas to clinical trial and eventually, commercialize and move forward. And investors are saying, yeah, I'm going to take it easy right now because of the market and be very careful who I select. So anything you can do to de-risk by engaging someone like Atlas Biotech or other partners can provide that evidence, can provide that reassurance in a time when maybe people are a little bit more apprehensive to write the check.
yeah, I would say it's a very risk averse market right now when it comes to funding. There's a lot of work that has to go into getting a potential drug to the point you want to put in trial. It's not cheap, but right now funders and investors and even the big biotechs, like the big pharma companies, they want to see things as de-risked as possible. They are like, oh, go ahead and show me the success from your phase 2 trial, and we'll talk. People got to get there somehow, so we want to try and make sure that we reduce that technical risk as much as possible. It's going to have to change because right now there's just not enough money going into the early stage work being done. With it as it stands, you need to have very cash conscious, affordable, efficient partners you can work with to help you get at least the next step down on your pipeline.
So I got to ask this. Atlas came through the Radian grant program, and we're curious to know what made you kind of like open up, invest your time and energy into engaging with the program and diving into commercialization and positioning. If memory serves me correct, our last grant recipient was also Philadelphia based. So maybe we have a bit of an affinity for Philadelphia, as I say that being less than an hour away from Boston. So all my Boston people don't give me trouble here. Well, maybe we need to get a Boston grant going here, but talk to me about
You have
what
a
made you open
predisposition towards Pennsylvania, it seems.
yeah, yeah.
No, that's
I'm noticing a correlation.
we won't make any assumptions there. Yeah, so I mean, again, I'm coming from an academic background, research. I don't know much about branding, marketing, that entire aspect. I have been told, this is actually a little revealing. I've been told by some of my advisors here, hey, you should really think about redoing your brand. You don't use like med tech, biotech color schemes. And I was like, oh man, well, I like my logo, but I, I want us to look professional. I'd give it the old college try to make a website and stuff and realize it's not my expertise. So I've been looking for help already in the space, and I think you might have reached out to me and suggested I look at it, and I was like, the timing was very serendipitous. I said, oh wow, this would be great. I can have some help with the weaker aspects of my branding and marketing and website design and everything. Yeah, I just saw that as an absolute win for me. And the help you all provided was fantastic, right? I really enjoyed working with you and Lindsay. That was a blast. And now we've got a very professional, clean website, and I am just, yeah, it's been great.
Well, first of all, appreciate you even letting us touch your work. It's such fascinating stuff, and we love doing it. All kidding aside, it's very important from a Radiant aspect. These ideas are complex. These ideas are not always easy to digest. It's hard to tell the story of what's taking place so that, not only the highly scientific and technical mind can observe and realize the opportunity, but also everyday people as well, like that, like we talked about it earlier, like how can we make things as plain spoken as possible? We can't dilute the science or the impact down to a point where like the message is lost, but it's just so important for us to be scientifically accurate, yet approachable and understandable. Also underscore the value and the upside to investors or future customers. So I hope that we help nudge you in that direction by working together. Can you?
Definitely.
I'd be curious to know, were there any aha moments as we like took a look at the material and thought about how we would approach positioning and doing a little bit of a rebrand for Atlas Biotech?
Yeah, I think I remember. I don't remember the exact language that you used, but I remember that one of the things you wrote as copy for the website, you just like distilled down what we did into a nutshell, and the copy was just like very, it was perfect, right? Like it was punchy, but it was accurate and concise, and that's the kind of stuff that I've struggled with is taking this, like you said, like a pretty complex uh product, service, whatever you want to call it, this research that we work on, and making that into a very distilled but still like meaningful piece of information that is accessible by people. That's what essentially you're trying to do, right? Is say, here's this complex idea in a nutshell, and here's what it means for you. And that is something that I think you were able to do quite well, is understand the science enough to be able to put it into to language that was concise and meaningful. Maybe the aha moment was, I'm not that good at this. I need help.
Well, I have to say, you gave us a great starting point, right? There was a brand and a website in place. And then, of course, the substance always drives the ability to tell a story. Without the work you do, without the innovative ideas that you're bringing to the table, there's no story to tell. For me, I think, my initial thought was like, okay, so they make libraries. But then we went on this journey of like you were just saying, what does that mean to the audience? And there was like this shift of like, yes, libraries are created, but what we're doing is de-risking the very expensive, very challenging path to clinical trial and getting your drug approved. And so like that for me, maybe it's not an aha moment or it's just a moment, but like that clicked for me. And I always appreciate the amount of grace that you've shown to imply that I understand the science deeply. I'm kidding. I get the drift of it, but I feel like we get to say, hold on, guys, we've been listening to these really smart and great people that are like dedicated and working on trying to transform our quality of life and improve the drugs that heal us and help us live. So like, wait. Like, I don't think you get it. Let me use art. Let me use design. Let me use engineering to not just make something that is great for greatness sake. It's something that is for the sake of the story, for the narrative, so that we can like translate and transmit like what's going on in the lab, what's going on in these high-tech facilities where people are toiling over solving big problems, and make it just really clear where things are headed, what's going on. Yeah, you can go find the paper. Yeah, you can go look up the people behind the scenes. But I think if you're missing that introductory layer that hooks people, then you have a problem that you got to solve.
I think it's a bit of a human aspect, right? Like you're trying to think about what is going to matter to the person that's looking at this, and how does this help them? What catches their eye? What color scheme's going to look nice? There's a very human aspect to what you're doing, and that is perhaps challenging for a lot of researchers to take the science and make it something that is personable almost, right? Like I think it's an art form for sure. And so watching the way that you were able to take the data and the science and make it into something that is honestly, I think our website's beautiful. I think it is like art, right? That was really cool, and I think that takes a lot of talent to do.
First of all, thank you so much. We'll relay to the entire team those very, very kind words. I think one of my favorite parts of what we worked on too was the genetic helix work, and like how we iterated and went back and forth. We wanted to nail that scientific accuracy, because we even have sketches from you that were like giving us guidance on how to handle that. And we're like, okay, like we've got to take a look at how things actually will make sense to a scientist and then design for that.
Yeah, I think that was one of the more fun conversations to have, because I was trying to make sure that there was like the artistic aspect, but that it was still like honest with what the like science is, and maybe I was a little bit more particular about it than I needed to be. But I was like, oh well, we have to make sure that it's like 3 nucleotides in a row to make a codon, and you guys were like, okay, but is it pretty? So that was really fun to work back and forth. And yeah, sketching out the designs and stuff was cool. Yeah, I think it was fun to try and merge the science and the visualization, the graphic design, the art, into a final product that was really enjoyable.
Follow-up question on this. Since launching the new Atlas Biotech website, new brand, how do you feel the company is represented differently? Where do you think this takes things going forward?
Well, I'm hoping that it really solidifies what we do in a way that it's like a marketing tool a little bit, right? I want people to be able to visit the website and get a good sense of who we are and the science that we do and how we work. To me, it's a resource. It's something that I want to be able to point to and have that kind of be self-explanatory for folks. And I think we did a good job getting it to that point. So yeah, I'm hoping that we can use it for outreach, for marketing, for education a bit too, right? I think that's important. And as we're starting to ramp up to what we think is going to be a full commercial deployment of some of these initial libraries that we've made, we're looking for people to work with, people to do pilot projects with for new libraries. This is, I think, a really useful tool in our toolkit of outreach and discussions with people.
Excellent. So, all right, that was the future of Atlas Biotech, which I think is genuinely bright and filled with opportunity. On a macro level, what shifts do you expect to see in oncology drug development over the next 5 to 10 years?
I think that's very tough to predict. There's a lot of opinions on this space. So, grain of salt with whatever I say. But as new modalities are being evaluated, adding to, we use the toolkit metaphor again. We have what we work on, which is targeted therapies, chemical medicines, right? We're trying to have inhibitors, modulators, binders. That's a whole class of medicines. And they're a cornerstone of oncology. So I don't think they're going away. I think that's going to be a tool that we continue to rely on and develop in. But then we also have the whole class of biologics. We have RNA-based therapies. We have cell therapies. People are doing in vivo cell therapies now, which is really exciting. We have gene therapies that are becoming, I hope, more accepted. I think that's going to be a really good tool for people to use. especially in more deadly diseases like aggressive cancers. I think that might be something that we need to rely on. There's lots of options there. And who knows, in 10 years, what it will look like. I think there's going to be a lot of different tools that we need given different situations, right? But what I think is my hope in 10 years is that we have improved our ability to not just say, oh, we have a patient with this disease, give them this medicine. I want us to be able to say, we have this patient with this specific genetic background, this specific disease set that is like not an umbrella disease, but like this is their disease. What's going to help them? I want us to get to personalized medicine and have that actually be the standard of care. I think that's what we need to move towards to actually have improved outcomes for all patients, not just, some percentage. So that's my hope. I think that we are moving that way. It'd be great to see that in the next 5 or 10 years.
Ladies and gentlemen, we had Josh on the show, Atlas Biotech, great company to check out. We'll share out their website and contact information on our channels. Josh, thanks for your time. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks for having me, Max. No, I appreciate it. Always a pleasure. And thanks again for all your help. It's been awesome working with you and the Radian team.
Appreciate it, man. Have a good one.
You too. I'll see you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Radian Podcast. If you found this episode insightful, we'd love for you to subscribe on your favorite podcast app or YouTube and follow us on LinkedIn or X for more updates and insights.